Well, it is time for a garden update here in the middle of May. It is beginning to warm up. We are expecting 90s this weekend. Actually, technically, it's going to be a heat wave as we will have 3 consecutive days in the 90s, and we are expected to be near or to surpass the average, not just the average, but the record high for this time of the year. So we're gonna have to be doing a lot of watering. It's very dry. We haven't had any rain so far this week and aren't expecting any until sometime in the middle of next week. So we're gonna have to be doing a lot of watering, and I'm gonna show you how I do watering here in this garden. We're not using any drip tape or sprinklers or anything like that because all of our raised beds, all of my raised beds are different shapes and different sizes, and I haven't figured out a good way to set up a watering system. And I don't mind watering it all by hand using a water hose and a spray watering wand. That works pretty good, and I can get my front and my back done in less than an hour, 45 minutes or so. And I really don't mind doing it. It's not been super hot, so it doesn't bother me too much. Might bother me a little bit more if the weather starts getting into the 90s. But right now, it's just kind of peaceful for me to get out there and to water everything by hand. It also gives me a chance to look at the garden beds and pull up any weeds that I see, and I just enjoy it. So for right now, that's working for me. So let's take a look at how I do that. Let's talk about the garden a little bit as I walk you through some things here. First of all, let's talk about this garden bed here. This was the first raised bed that I built, and I thought, let's maximize the amount of space that I have. I have a certain amount of scrap wood, and it would allow me to build this size bed. And so I thought, bigger, better, right? 11 feet long by 6 feet wide. And I thought, that's great. I can grow a lot of food in that amount of square feet. But what I didn't realize as a beginner was that it's really hard to reach from the outside of the bed into the middle of the bed. You know, everything along the edge, just fine. Stuff in the middle, hard to get to. You can reach it, but you have to bend over really far, and it's not easy, and it just makes tending the garden difficult. So, if I had to do it again, I would have done it differently. I would have made it about 3 or 4 feet wide and twice as long. And that way, you can always get to everything that's in the middle. Of course, after I'd already built it, and after I'd already learned that hard lesson, I saw lots of people saying the very same thing. And so subsequently, the other beds that I built, like that one down there, I did just that. Make them narrower, no more than 4 feet wide, and then you can make them as long as you want, but 4 feet wide is the ideal. 3 or 4 feet wide is ideal. What I have been able to use these beds for, though, because they're extra wide and they're hard to get to the middle, I try to plant things in them that you're not going to have to harvest regularly. So for instance, over here, I've got these onions. These onions were planted, I think, in the beginning of January, and they're still not ready for harvest. They probably have another month or two before they'll be ready to harvest. And once I harvest them, I'll just do it all at one time. And so I won't have to be constantly, day by day, reaching into the middle. Also in here, I have planted watermelon and cantaloupe. Those are also things that will take a while to grow, and will, you can just sort of harvest them all at once. You don't have to pick on them every day. Now I have planted some green beans in this plot, but I planted the green beans along the edges so that I can easily reach into those and get to them. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about is, you'll notice how I have in all of my plots, I planted a lot of things close together and I've mixed things together. For instance, I have cantaloupe planted, and right alongside it I have beans. And this is something that I really wanted to try to do this year, was companion planting. What are some plants that can work together and help each other? Also, on the outside, I have flowers planted. These are sunflowers. I also have some nasturtium planted. And the idea there, you can see there's a butterfly. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. There's a butterfly that's flying around. Butterflies and bees are attracted to the flowers. And then, of course, the vegetables need pollinators to help them actually create fruit. And so planting these things together, the beans put nitrogen into the soil, the cantaloupe and the watermelon use the nitrogen that the beans are putting into the soil, and hopefully they're helping each other grow. That does mean that things are growing kind of crowded, and hopefully, my hope though is, you see how this cantaloupe, it is a vine that's going to run out and get longer and longer and longer. Same thing with the watermelons. They're going to sprawl out, and they will find the light. They will crawl to the light and find it wherever it is. The beans, these are bush beans, and they will grow up, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 feet tall. And so they don't spread out like a vine, they'll grow straight up. So hopefully the two different types of growing patterns will allow the plants to live side by side without causing each other trouble, but at the same time they also will help each other. Similarly, in my tomato plants, here's a better example over here in my tomato plants. Of course, in the tomato plant, you're going to have this space around the edges, which tends to grow weeds. So, for instance, right here, can you see that? I planted basil. Basil and tomatoes, boy, they just seem to be made for each other, right? I mean, when you make spaghetti sauce, you have tomatoes and you have basil working together in the sauce, and my hope is that they also work together pretty good in the soil. The basil will spread out and sort of cover the ground so that weeds can't get in there, and the tomatoes will grow up tall. In this bed, I planted carrots, and they're growing good and bushy. Right behind that, I have snow peas, which will grow up nice and tall, and so the two things kind of work together. The snow peas help the soil and put minerals into the soil that help the carrots, and so they hopefully are working together. This bed is getting nice and big and tall, and within probably the next 3 or 4 weeks, this bed will be completely harvested and emptied out, and then I'm going to put peanuts in there. But the snow peas are coming in, and you can see there are flowers all over these vines. These flowers are attracting pollinators, bees, butterflies, which is helping to pollinate. Each one of these flowers will turn into one of these beans. As you can see, these beans that are growing. So this thing, I'm thinking, is I've already harvested a couple of handfuls of peas off of this, and they taste wonderful. Super sweet, crunchy, crispy. Just eat them right off the vine. But these snow peas, I think, are going to be loaded up with these snow peas, sugar snap peas, within next week or two. I hope so, because it's starting to get warmer. This weekend we're supposed to get into the 90s for the first time this year, and I don't think the heat's going to be really good for these snow peas or for those carrots. So in the hay bale planters, got my lettuce. I'm overrun with lettuce. I've been giving it away as fast as I can, but you can see it's just sprawling out, doing really well. But again, the heat's probably not going to be good for the lettuce. But I also have cantaloupe, watermelon growing here. I've got beans planted directly into the hay bales, and they're sprouting up. So again, the watermelon and the cantaloupe will vine out and spread out actually outside of the planter. I'm expecting it to get out into the yard and just start crawling all over the place. And the beans, meanwhile, will grow up so they can share the space together. Over here, this hay bale planter, again, this one you can see is just overrun with lettuce. This is a heading type of lettuce. It's called butterhead. And so I'm trying to let it get some good heads on it before I harvest it. But you can see how the watermelon looks like it's choked out in there. And I'm ready to get this lettuce out of here so that the watermelon has all the space that it wants. But so far, this watermelon's doing a pretty good job. These vines, they just go where they need to go, and they find the sun. And so they're able to live alongside this lettuce, and hopefully certainly be able to live alongside the beans. So potatoes are just really doing great. And I mean, the plants look great. Of course, I've talked to you before about faith and potatoes, because although the outside of those potato plants looks great, you don't know what's happening underneath the soil. You just have to trust that it's all coming together, but you really won't know until the day you harvest it. But yeah, loving to seeing these potatoes plants grow. I still have some hard neck garlic here that's probably got, I don't know, a little bit longer. It shouldn't be too much longer. I already harvested my soft neck garlic last week because I noticed the stalks were falling over. So I pulled one up to check it, and sure enough, it had already begun to split. So I decided to go ahead and pull it all up, and about 80% of it was just right. 20% had begun to split, but I got it up and started letting it dry. It needs to dry and cure for about 2 weeks, and then that will help it to last for several months, and it'll be great. More onions. These onions are ahead of the other onions I showed you. Lettuce, pepper plants. That one was planted several weeks before these, so I'm hoping they'll catch up. Again, we've got marigolds as a companion plant. Marigolds are supposed to help ward off some of the pests that bother these plants, and so I'll keep them close together and hopefully they'll work together. There you can see one of the onion flowers. Isn't that a crazy looking flower? I left one of my collard plants here. I cut it way back because it was looking like a tree, but I think I'm going to leave it there and just see if it survives the hot of the summer, and then maybe in the winter, or in the cooler months, not the winter, but in the fall, maybe it'll come back and I can actually have that. More pepper plants, some onions, squash over here, tomatoes. In this middle section, I planted some garbanzo beans. I had a packet of garbanzo beans, and I waited a little bit longer than I should have to plant them. I'm supposed to plant them a little bit earlier, but I figured let's give it a try. Let's just see what happens. It's sort of an experiment. Boy, these are potato flowers. Aren't they pretty? The Viking potatoes have a white flower, and the Adirondack blue potatoes have a purple flower. None of these here have the purple flowers on them, but some of them in my front plot do. And there's a cabbage. Starting to get a little tiny head on it, but I don't know if that's gonna survive the heat that's coming, because it's getting hot this weekend, and it's probably gonna be getting a lot, because we're gonna have a lot more hot weather after that, and I don't know if it's gonna make it or not. We'll see. Tomato plant. Look at that, it's getting some flowers on it. You know what that means? We'll be having some tomatoes before too long. Zucchini plant has some flowers on it, even has a little zucchini going down there. I've got some room here. I've got peppers. I've got 2 types of basil growing. Nasturtium. Over here, potatoes. These potatoes are growing directly in that hay bale. Isn't that cool? So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works. I'll just tear that whole bale apart when it's ready and then see what kind of potatoes we have in it. Here we have squash plant, crookneck squash. It's got some flowers on it. Dill growing right alongside the squash. Basil growing down there. More dill with the tomatoes and the basil. So all of that stuff is growing together. So along with our companion planting idea, we're also trying to work together with nature. That we just love watching the birds that are coming, and they're singing, and we're learning about birds, and they're getting some good food that they're eating. And also birds are good for fighting off pest insects that bother your vegetables. So it's kind of another form of companions working together. While I've been focusing on vegetables, my wife has been having a wonderful time focusing on flowers with her roses and her, she knows more about the names of the flowers than I do. You know what type of flowers these are? I know the name of them, but it just slipped my mind just now. But she's got all kinds of great flowers growing, and they're beautiful. So they make our yard look great. They attract butterflies and bees, which are good for the flowers and good for the vegetables too. So all of that stuff just works together, and it's just a wonderful thing for my wife and I to be working together and having fun out in the yard. And we've just truly enjoyed this spring. Like I said, it's starting to warm up a little bit, and it's going to be a lot hotter out in the garden starting probably in the next couple of weeks. Actually starting this weekend. We'll see if it cools off a little bit after this weekend, but hey, June is right around the corner. And where I live in Cohutta, Georgia, June, July, August, even September are just really, really hot. And so it you just have to learn to live with it. But I'd rather be hot than cold, so I guess I live in the right place. I just can't stand to shiver. I don't like being hot and sweaty either, but I'd rather be hot and sweaty than cold and shivery. So anyway, that's just a little update on our garden. Things are going really good. We've got some carrots that have been harvesting. And I'll be harvesting more of them as we go along. And it's just been a wonderful thing. So in the Bible, the Apostle Paul talks about how the church is the body of Christ, and we function like a body. And what he says is that we don't all have the same gifts. Some of us have the ability to speak. Some of us have the ability to have great wisdom. Some people can prophesy, other people can interpret prophecies, some people can sing, some people can serve, some people can heal, and the list of gifts goes on and on and on. But not everybody has all gifts. And that's why we all work together, just like the human body. You have a hand that functions for a certain purpose. You have eyes that function for a certain purpose. You have feet that function for a certain purpose. And so as your body all works together, your life, you're able to live and to function and to do what you need to do. And just as the garden has a lot of different kinds of plants that can work together, and the butterflies and the bees and the birds and even the insects all have a purpose. So, although we might not like bugs or we might not like this and that, they all have a purpose. God created them all with a purpose. And our world around us is full of all of these living creatures that have a purpose. And so as a church or as a community, as a neighborhood, we all are made up of different kinds of people, different kinds of gifts, but we need each other. I'm a person that believes very strongly in being independent. And if I can do something myself, I try to do it myself. Much of my life and many of my hobbies are built around the idea of being independent, doing things myself, like building this truck. But as independent as I am, and as much as I like the idea of gardening so that I can grow my own food and be self-sufficient, we have to understand, I have to always remember, human beings were not created by God to be completely independent. We are social creatures. We need one another. Doesn't matter how talented you are, how resourceful you are always going to need other people. And so you have to learn to live together with other people. You have to learn to get along with people, to trust people, to cooperate with people, to give to other people, and to receive from other people. Because we just cannot get through this life all by ourselves. Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there that believe in self-sufficiency, and I do too. But part of surviving and being self-sufficient and sustainable is learning to work together collectively with our neighbors. So if you want to live off the grid or whatever it is that you want to do like that, you have to understand that you're going to have to learn, as part of your skills is not just learning to grow food or make repairs or hunt or fish or all of that kind of things. Part of the most important survival skills that humans need to know is how to get along with one another, how to cooperate with one another, because you will not survive for long on your own. And even if somehow you do survive all by yourself, you will not be all that you were intended to be if you are all by yourself. So we have to have friends, we have to have family, we have to have community. It's not optional. It's the way God created us to be. So we have to learn how to do that. How can you learn how to do that?